Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cyber Insanity, our Goliath Cyber Security podcast to help explain things in the cybersecurity space. And as promised, we always like to bring relevant information to you. So I am your host, Andrew Berkuta. And
I'm Angelo Longo, the co-host, and we welcome today Justin Hatcher
from Rixon Technology. Welcome to our show, Justin. And there's some excitement here. There's some excitement. Let me share the excitement with our podcast listeners. There has been a big partnership between Goliath Cyber Security and Rixon Technologies. And Rixon Technologies, we will explain why we're so excited to bring Justin in at this time. Rixon Technology has something called tokenization. And this is, I think, fundamentally different than encryption. And we'll get into why and why it's important. But one of the things that we always like to do is first understand who our guest is and why we invited him.
Why did we invite this guy?
Why? Because he has a cool baseball cap. I don't know. Because he smiles nice. He looks good on a.
That's why.
That's why. So Justin, let's take a little bit of a pause here and just explain who you are, how you got to Rixon, what you did to get you there.
Sure. Well, again, good morning. Glad to be here. So I guess the history of Justin, the technology career starts about 20 years ago. Solving all kinds of problems. That's who I am. I've always been a builder, and just kind of somebody who likes to solve the really challenging problems. And then about I guess so that's fast forwarding through all kinds of industries, including fintech and oil and gas and healthcare and energy and food and beverage and just entertainment all over the map. And through that first 10 years of looking at that, seeing like very, very repetitive security related and data related problems. And so the last really 10 years of my career, still in technology, has been focused around solving these, again, repetitive problems that exist across all industries. And then I guess, about 8 years ago, co-founder and I developed Rixon and I solutioned and developed patents around the process that we'll be talking about today. And so then applying what Rixon has developed and implemented into companies today, solving, again, credit card, PII, EPHI problems.
Awesome. So you've been busy. You've been
busy. Yeah.
You've been in the thick of things, which kind of brings us to today, our podcast. I mean, in our podcast, we listed it as ransomware, right? Why did I talk with Angelo and go, what should we encapsulate this under? Is ransomware is a good use case? Let's just say it's a good use case for something that's very relevant to us today. Angelo, so when we talk about ransomware, what are we for our listeners? What are we talking about with ransomware that is of particular impact, or what current methods are employed and why aren't they working?
Well, for people who don't know what ransomware is an attack on your data, your processes, your function to operate. And what it is they utilize technologies to encrypt your data. Now, their use of that could be to just stop your operations, or their use of that could be to exfiltrate data, or something in between. In the end, they're most likely doing it for monetary purposes. But there are some people who do it for altruistic or non-altruistic purposes. The reality behind it is the best way to stop it is, 1, make sure your safeguards are up, 2, educate your employees, and 3, always make sure there's a backup. But what happens if that data is exfiltrated? They're encrypting it. It's not encrypted. If it's not encrypted on your part, that's number one. They're encrypting. They're bringing data that's not encrypted. Number 2, what happens to that data once it gets out of your organization? Well, the cat's out of the bag at that point. So what happens is you need to make sure that you have some services in place to help you protect that. And so just because you backed it up doesn't mean the data isn't lost from the point of view of it being exposed. That's something that everybody needs to understand. Just because you can operate doesn't mean you'll be operating for long, because the simple fact is you just gave everybody's data away.
Yeah.
Not a great place.
Yeah, and one thing we know about cyber bad actors is if they find something that worked the first time, they're bound to come back another time and get a second helping. It's almost like the buffet bar is open. Let's go again until they figure out and learn their lesson. And worse, what we've seen is in certain cases, they'll inform the federal regulatory body and say, oh, by the way, they're not complying by their stuff because we have their data. That's pretty audacious and bold, and I think that's really throwing down a gauntlet. So with ransomware, though, you've mentioned encryption, and this is where I turn to Justin and going, we're not really talking about encryption per se with tokenization, are we? That's something different. That's a different animal. Can you kind of explain what tokenization is and why is it fundamentally different from an encryption?
That was my question, Kirky.
Oh,
Well, let me help you. I think I can help.
but I want to know now. Sorry, Angelo.
So so both encryption and tokenization, first and foremost, are both ways to protect data. They're both ciphering mechanisms. So they're both under that same umbrella. There's several key differences, but I'll start with that encryption is a technology-based solution. It protects data at a very specific point in time. Whether that's, we trust TLS to go from my browser to the internet. We encrypt the database at a specific technology. If you're using MySQL, you'll encrypt your data at rest. You encrypt all of these places at single points in time, which really kind of make a Swiss cheese of a technology environment where there's holes where maybe encryption wasn't done or wasn't done well or hasn't been updated, all of these different places. So encryption is really, again, that point in time way to protect data, and it's tried and true in that regard. Kind of aligns with specific technologies. Tokenization, on the other hand, is more of a holistic approach. This is end-to-end in my environment. Tokens are going to be what's transmitted, what's stored, what's used in processing. And that way, an organization, in that regard, an organization is secure from end to end, not worried about all the ticks or all the points that it has to use encryption to make those individual points safe.
So if I use this analogy and you seem to, somebody had seemed to like it, when I want pure water coming out, I want to drink some pure water, right? Tokenization is a little different. If the water is the data, if you will, encryption is kind of the copper pipe, right? We're wrapping the data around it, but it doesn't necessarily encrypt the data unless there's a mechanism to do so, to filter that water, to make sure that it's done. That's really tokenization. So if I break the copper pipe somehow, cut it, manipulate it, tap into it or whatever, I can't guarantee that the water is pure from the source or is the same from the source.
Right.
We got to boil the water. We got to do something with the water.
Right.
Whereas if I have data encryption, the filter, it's filtered through and through.
Right. Right. So in that same analogy, I mean, if you had a system of pipes and processes that your filtered water is getting to your tap or to your cup, there's all kinds of places that could be spliced in and contaminating that water. And tokenization is different in that model, in that it is something that's placed at the very beginning of that process that screens and transforms said water to the process, and then fit it in at the very end of your tap where you're putting into your cup, such that you know that no matter what happens to that water throughout that process, what you're going to be getting out is the same thing as what started at the very beginning.
Yeah, and where I think that analogy fails is
Yeah,
right that it does fail to a degree that in the analogy we're still assuming that the water goes through a transport mechanism
right.
that is keeping the integrity, where tokenization really it from end to end it's tokenized until the final use form that you need it.
Exactly.
In which
Yeah.
case, in which case, throughout the transport, throughout the cloud, for wherever it may reside or be stored, it's tokenized.
That's right.
So here's a question to Angelo from because you mentioned Justin mentioned the Swiss cheese approach, right? And auditors look for the holes in the cheese, right?
Right.
And they're going to look for where did your encryption break down? Where did you not encrypt? Where did you absorb the risk?
So if I was looking at this, they look at it from a layered approach.
Okay.
You have to show the control and its activity, and show that activity actually produces something that protects the data in question. So the reality is, when we look at this, there are some auditors who will come in and say there was no encryption, fail. There's some auditors who come in and say tokenization is not encryption,
Fail.
I'm sorry. But the reality is, you end up spending time with each auditor and saying, okay, I know this is tokenization, and I know we don't have encryption on this particular data set. But the tokenization in question here is really obfuscating all data that's in any real format. So in what way could this be, could this be reversed? Especially if I choose to not have the ability to reverse it. Especially if I choose to say, no, I don't want to, I want to anonymize this thing. Justin,
Right.
does your product anonymize?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. So our customers have the option to configure their tokens however they want, and the security policies around those tokens. But certainly, one of them is unreversible. Unreversibility or completely anonymous to solve for those types of use cases.
Actually, talk to me about that for a second. If I wanted to generate a report, and this is just me spitballing here from pain, I wanted to generate a report, and on that report, I wanted anonymized data in the format that it carries on, cost on. But maybe in the back end infrastructure, I wanted to remain in some type of convertible format. Is that possible?
Absolutely, yeah. So I mean, in that really kind of abstract, you're saying that whenever this report is run, it can't see full text information of the tokens that are stored or that is going to be reported on.
That'd be awesome. The reality is, a lot of data gets exfiltrated through seemingly meaningless reports.
So absolutely. I mean, humans have. I mean, obviously, like, especially in this age of like microservices and multi-dimensional departments and roles, all the cross sections of everything that we have today. Having a single system, even like Microsoft AD, that tries to say, what somebody's roles and access are, that's not the reality in any technology environment. I mean, people, different applications have their own set of users, own set of roles. It's a nearly impossible job to keep track of what somebody has access to, what they can see. And that Swiss cheese analogy, there's so many holes in everybody's environment today.
Agreed. Yeah. So looking at this, I see some possibilities for some of my customers, even, looking at some of these points. I'm an old traditionalist. I've done and implemented tokenization products in the past, and looking at that, I mean, if you were going to differentiate yourself, throw it out there, how would you differentiate your product from the traditional old piece that some of us may have done in the past? Some hard-headed individuals have a hard time getting over what was done in the past. Talk to me about what you guys do.
Yeah. So I'm familiar with this as well. if you were to search tokenization, there's hundreds of companies that provide this functionality on the surface. So tokenization is a substitution at its root. It's just a substitution of values. Most companies, 95% of them out there, are providing what's called a vault. And this is, you're going to take your information, you're going to ship it off to them. They're going to promise you it's safe. And whenever you need to read that information, you're going to say, here's my token, give me my raw data back.
Pause right there. That's similar to what people do with those VPNs.
Right.
I'm just going to connect to whatever VPN, and I hope it's safe on the other end.
They
don't have any clue.
It's risk transference is what it is. It's saying that I'm going to trust, since I don't trust myself to keep it safe, I'm going to trust somebody else, and maybe manage with contracts and other things, but hope that they don't get attacked or get ransomware or all these other things. The key differentiating thing with our platform and Rixon is that we're vaultless. We're not saying that you need to trust us with your information. It's a true risk mitigation approach where we bifurcate the data persistence, which is that our customers are going to store their information like they're doing today, and we're going to do the ciphering so that there is no single point of attack or breach where your data is right to be stolen. It's really a collaborative effort to really, like I said, mitigate true risk.
So really your data is staying where you want it. You don't have to offload it, offshore it, or whatever to somebody else's data center.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, if our customers were to get hit with ransomware and their information was extorted, it's all tokens. If again, Rixon on the other side was hit with the same type of thing, we don't have your information. So really those data breaches are now like exponentially more harder to are more difficult to achieve, having consent really split across multiple companies.
Well, that's going to be important for regulatory compliance, and it removes the complexity of it because you're not including a third party, another VPN tube or some type of transport out to another facility, right? I mean, you're looking at, let's pick on either GDPR or CMMC. You're not transporting your data outside your four walls.
That's right.
You're just tokenizing it so that in my four walls or anywhere that I move it, it's already tokenized sans Avast. A vault that you don't need a third party to either unencrypt it or, untokenize it and then send it back to you.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we know what Angelo says about complexity.
Yeah.
So
it's my time.
No, far be it from that. I mean, so really there's some cost benefit to this, I would imagine, by not putting this much infrastructure in there too. I mean, you're recouping a lot of that cost just to stand it up. But how about something like data loss prevention, right? Where companies, let's say a legal firm or a medical firm that has to deal with HIPAA, they're transporting a lot of data back and forth. They need access to that. Traditionally, I've seen DLP play in those areas where there's a big ramp up to getting into it, like categorization, for example. I need to know what it is, I have to put a value to it, a category to it, and a priority in which to start putting in that type of technology. What's the ramp up? What's a realistic ramp up to tokenization?
Right. It's less than that traditional approach where you do have to categorize and know all of your data. The less part is again, if we have this complex end-to-end technology environment in the traditional approach, again, you have to know where all of your data is in all of that environment. really where an implementation of Rixon looks like is where does data come into my environment and where does it leave my environment? So it's a significantly less of a unknown or places to discover where that is than having to know where it is and all inside of a complete technology like I said environment.
Interesting.
So I guess you asked Andrew like
Yeah.
realistic time frame. Yeah, we've had customers enroll and begin to see value in 48 hours, up to 2 months.
Well,
Okay. Okay, that's throwing down because in DLP, and Angelo and I were in companies that had offered DLP products. I mean, our ramp up time for a DLP project in a rather large company or medium-sized company was, okay, well, you're going to have consulting hours where you're going to have to go through this, and there's meeting upon meeting to categorize.
Yep.
I don't know if this is important. I don't know how important it is. We're going to have another meeting and a sub meeting to that because this is painful. Categorization is painful. It's like taking inventory of everything that you have that you didn't know you had. It's like,
Yeah.
and to our podcast listeners, it's like going into your garage that is full of stuff and saying, put a price tag for every item in your garage that we're going to have a garage sale on. Oh, and by the way, it's this Saturday, so get busy. You have to pull everything out. You have to look at it. You have to examine this stuff and say, one, do I want it? Two, how long do I want it? Like my retention period. And then how important is this that I have to put a price tag on it?
Yeah. And so I've been a part of these too, Andrew, and like you spend 6, 7, 12 months trying to categorize this, and you're bored asking, why am I spending all this money? Where's the output? We haven't even got past the
You
discovery.
haven't realized anything yet. You haven't even encrypted any of your data yet in a DLP environment because you're still trying to figure out categorization. But yet your gap of protection has not been bridged.
Right.
You're
Right.
still exposed until you figure out what you want to protect.
let me ask a question. If we we had a customer who had data sitting someplace, and we had something like a DLP product that could recognize it,
Mhm.
could that DLP product call your product and apply tokenization?
Yep. Absolutely.
So I find content X and I say, call Rixon API. I'm assuming API, correct?
That's right.
And it does its thing and then applies it. And then suddenly now we're at a point of now the data has been obfuscated, has been tokenized, has been changed in the ways that are the more fancy tokenization. I think I have to come up with a new name. Tokenization just seems so old. Fancy tokenization is it. Andrew, make that happen.
Yeah, so that time to value is the critical metric today. I need help today. I'm bleeding, or the ransomware, whatever it is. I don't want to spend 12 months trying to figure this stuff out. It's so many of those environments again, Andrew, like you're saying, like I've gone into, and they have this some system that all the developers left 30 years ago. We don't know anything about it, and that discovery process of trying to secure something that nobody knows anything about is extremely painful and costly. It's not practical. It needs to be secure, but it's not practical to try to unpack and unravel something of that complexity.
That's a good point. That's really going back in. Okay, I'm going to date myself. Professor Peabody's Wayback Machine, right? For those of us who remember this is going back in time to try to figure out what you've done, what it was that you've done, and then now try to categorize it, wrap it, and then protect it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I like Angelo's hypothetical here with being able to identify it kind of on the fly and saying, hey, protect that before it goes out the door.
Yeah,
that makes sense. That to me seems sustainable, and I'll still retain the hairs on my head at the end of the day. But while I find it, I can protect it because I've tokenized it.
Mhm.
Ooh, good
And
use case, Angelo.
And that tokenization, again, I'll come back to, it's format preserving, which means that you don't have to go back and make significant modifications to, the underlying data store or anything like that. It's the data that the intrinsic value, like if it's a number, or a binary string, or all of the intrinsic nature of all of that is preserved, so it still fits. It's very easy to implement versus like an encryption where you're having to make pretty significant modifications.
So can we pick on that for a second? Why should that matter to me?
I think so. So in that same vein, I think the cost to achieve value is significant. So whenever if we're talking about a legacy application,
Okay.
that nobody's modified, it's running on an AS400, something kind of old. It's it's it's
I know people still use AS400s, so
I'm
and
so
sorry.
do I.
as a core infrastructure.
I'm
So
sorry again.
And that's my point. Like trying to go through and make something like that secure
Yeah.
when it's built on technology that is not secure, but you have to secure it because it's part of your business. It's incredibly costly. You don't want to go through and say, okay, now I want every step in this technology or in this process to use encryption and then manage those keys. And it's just a long, long process versus tokenization that can say, I'm going to change the data before it goes into this thing. When it comes out of the black box, I'm going to change it back. Everything inside of that black box I know is secure now because it does not have data.
So when we talk about protecting the format of it, so let's take a social security number, right? Set of numbers, dash, set of numbers, dash, set of numbers. What I'm hearing from you when you preserve that means on my AS400, I don't have to rewrite the code to accommodate for a string value that's going to be replacing number dash number dash number. I can keep it in the same syntax,
Yeah.
not change my field number count,
Right.
still preserving that formatting. So I don't have to change any code. I don't have to pay any developers to do that, to revamp this.
That's right.
But the data itself is still scrambled where I can't steal it, read it in its raw natural form.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so there's some hidden value there by doing that, which I think is often overlooked because if you're a developer, well, if you're a developer, you're not going to be getting more dollars to change that. But from a company who has those AS400s or those boxes that are very tight on space and they like to have their data crunched in such a format, in a rigid format, preserving that means everything. Because now I'm not spending millions of development dollars revamping it just to accommodate scrambling my data to be able to thwart the bad guy.
Those development dollars are really, really, I'm really kind of passionate about this equation that as a company, I have to implement some level of security, whether that's required by regulation or not. And
Yeah.
and how many development dollars should I spend to achieve a checkbox? And it's tokenization. Really, again, at the very beginning of this conversation is a really holistic approach, an end-to-end environment way to secure data across all these technology things. And there's always going to be new regulations. So looking at that again, the AS400 or a specific microservice more closely related, today. Instead of trying to secure each one of these individually, which again is a lot of development dollars, the ultimate goal is like I want my organization and technology to be safe so I can operate business. The goal is not I need microservice ABC to be safe. The goal is I need data across my organization to be safe so that I can do what I'm best at.
So data is the new commodity, and if you preserve that data, you're taking the commodity away from the threat actor that can potentially exploit it and get, be it ransomware or getting the data itself to be able to exploit or go after my user base.
That's right.
I think one of the hidden benefits to this, and you said whether it's regulatory or not, one of the things that we're seeing a lot today is partnerships with other companies. Usually upstream large companies are now mandating more stringent guidelines on protecting the data, right? Not being that weak link in their chain. Does this satisfy it? And has this proven to them? Because to Angelo's question about auditors, that they're like, oh, if you're not encrypted, I can't give you the checkbox. There's a little bit of education here that has to occur to explain, and I think maybe this is the stigma of this, is to explain tokenization sufficiently to say it's a valid form of protecting data. How can it be its own checkbox? as an either or both encryption and tokenization for a defense in depth type of discussion?
I think we go two directions that Rixon has taken there, or is currently taking. One is working with those kind of governing bodies to educate what tokenization is, include that in part of their audits or their governing regulatory language. Because that's still much of a new thing. I mean, even like PCI DSS has verbiage around tokenization. HIPAA does not. So there's areas of industry that have not caught up to that same language and same capabilities that technology provides. So number one, working with those to educate and create that new language. Number two, Rixon has already plowed this road with several auditing firms. So we've already done that legwork of education. We've proven that we've brought them in. They understand that what is data, where is data, and been able to compress those that scope of their audit to a very, very, in some cases, a zero. There is no data in this organization, and therefore, the audit is completed in a week or two. Versus, again, going back to what Angelo was saying, like you get an auditor in there, and you have to prove every hop that data might transition to, every person, process, technology stack, persistence, transit, all of those things that you have to prove that you're doing a mitigating, that you're securing or have a mitigating control, is a vast difference today when you can say, I don't have information between these points. So it's not something that needs to be scoped.
Yeah. Angelo, if this would be an arrow in your quiver, I mean, this would be huge.
Yeah, in a lot of cases, customers whom have issues with, say, they don't really have RBAC controls, role-based access controls,
right?
Controls that states the fact that you as a person do or do not need access to something to do your job, or need to know is another way to throw it out, or the reality is there's a number of different names to wrap around this, but the issue at hand is you don't want to expose data you don't need to expose and go from there. And a lot of times we end up exposing more for the virtue of operations, because one, we don't understand the ramifications of the exposure, and two, the change to the operations is more than they want to consume. So what happens is you end up in this situation where you're kind of stuck. Do I or don't I? And you spend more time thinking about that than you do anything. In the case of this is someplace where I could see customers having this as an interesting idea. Actually, let me ask a question. Social Security numbers is one place, but And you tell me this roadmap, or tell me this is something you can do right now. You have a field. It has a credit card piece in there, 16 digits. You take that. Can you, like, a lot of times they want to do verification of the last 4 or 6 digits of that. Can you just tokenize that first part? Is that something that can be done?
Absolutely, yeah. So again, in the case of credit card numbers, this applies to all of the tokens. You can assign, again, with those security policies, how much data is preserved or exposed within a string. So for credit card numbers, a very common use case is to keep the first 6, keep the last 4, tokenize everything in the middle, so that data is still usable for operations. You can still have a customer service department understand it's a Visa and this is the last 4 that they paid on, without actually exposing the real credit card numbers themselves.
That's a really cool thing.
That is, I was going to say, yeah.
The other interesting things, like if you want characteristics of this token to be able to identify if it's a token or not, do you want that credit card number to pass a Lung-10 check? So you want it to act and feel like a credit card number, or do you want to make sure it never passes a Lung check, so you can know, if you wanted to prove to an auditor, or if you just wanted to know if somebody's actually being able to look at a credit card number, because again, they all look like 16-digit numbers. Yeah. You can tweak all of those things on what your format preserving tokens look like.
Yeah, this is a very interesting methodology, because in the end you're anonymizing the data in that question in a way. If you could anonymize the middle of a credit card number, and thus cause that number to be invalid, and then at least for that person, related to that person, and such like that, thus allowing you to present it as you don't have the data. So I love that concept of not changing the format, not changing it, but just replacing the data in question with something that does not relate to the former.
The fantasy case, Angelo, is a customer tokenizes all of their credit card information. And all of this information, all these credit card numbers, get stolen and taken somewhere else. Number one, that they're tokens, that the data breach hasn't occurred. But an indirect, interesting case is now when they start trying to use these tokens, which look like credit card numbers, they're fingerprinting themselves and identifying who they are without actually losing any information.
So now we can backtrack.
Ooh.
Right.
That's evil. I like it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's slick.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me this before. This is interesting.
Yeah. Now this has become the little evil.
Yeah. Now you can go after. Oh, this is really cool.
I need a cat to pet.
downstream interesting benefits that come from tokenization, which again you don't get from encryption, because again, in that same use case, somebody steals a whole bunch of encrypted cards. Number one, they're almost always use one key to encrypt them all. So they spend some time to decipher that one key. Now they have all of your credit card information again. You have this data loss, you have this data exposure, you're apologizing to customers, a whole bunch of bad things.
Sure, but not in this context, because arguably the data has been exfiltrated, but it hasn't been breached because there's no way to untokenize it.
Right.
Okay, so this is a chicken or the egg in the last final thoughts here so is that reportable? I guess you'd still have to report it, but it's not necessarily a breach. Well, this becomes an ethical question now. Is this something that needs to be reported because it's exfiltrated, but it's not been breached?
We're in an area that
I don't know who to ask, Justin or Angelo, on this one.
It hasn't.
This is weird.
Jump ball.
Hey.
because encryption has been like the dominant means of saying something is quote unquote safe, which and it's safe by what standards? By the how long it takes us to crack crack a key of a certain size by today's modern computers. What happens with quantum computing when you enter into parallel processing, a whole bunch of things. So even the notion of how safe encryption is a bit of a question. But today, encryption is still classified as the data itself, and all of the regulatory mechanisms for whenever data is lost does require reporting to either government or constituents or users. And this area now that we're in with tokenization is a little bit undocumented on what it is. I think it probably comes up to an ethical thing today, but I hope that becomes more formalized and a formalized process for it.
It'd be interesting, and then reporting the fact that everything. So this kind of comes down to in the government world, the report or don't report that something did happen. Kind of scenario. Almost like there needs to be a back channel reporting structure that doesn't include a 10Q or a 10. So just saying.
Well, you may report it, but the outcome is benign. There's nothing of value. So you don't have to offer in the commercial space. You don't have to offer the 2 years of monitoring service for your clients. You can provide a letter of assurance that, hey, breaches happen. It's breached as far as something have been taken, but rest assured the data has been tokenized, so there is no impact to your information. It still holds, even outside in that form. Wow, yeah, it becomes an ethical issue of what is reported, how it should be reported, and does it need to be reported? I guess.
I think we need a legal mind.
Oh, I know I was thinking that, Rebecca. We're channeling Rebecca. This is going to be a Rebecca question. This is one of our cyber attorneys that we partner with, and she's very good at spitballing these types of hypotheticals.
I already know her answer, though.
Oh, what's that?
It depends.
Yeah.
Right.
Rebecca, I just called you out.
There you go. Well, in the final few minutes, I did want to once again thank Justin for joining with us from Rixon and Technologies and explaining tokenization, something that I think is an exciting new arrow in our quiver to be able to bring to through our partnership with Rixon. And certainly if our podcast listeners want to know more about it, we have links on Goliath's website. We could certainly talk to you at length and bring some of our experts on to talk with you about this. But in just the final thoughts of this, what a tremendous opportunity to do even more in protecting data where data lies, where data is, and not just putting a crunchy layer on this. I think it's an interesting technology that finally is able to solve a very big issue in just ransomware alone. But there are far more use cases. And Angelo, what are your final thoughts on this?
Looking at this from my perspective, my lens, my mantra, this adds a layer of simplicity to the conversation. This adds a layer of explainability to the conversation. In both ways, this gives me the opportunity to protect my customers in a better way and allow them to and make it so that I don't have to wreck an environment in order to provide protection. I like that a lot. And in that, it goes along with what I think and how I think it. And I don't know. Is this my opportunity to say my thing?
It is. Final thought.
Wait, before I say it, Justin, do you have a catchphrase?
I don't have a catchphrase. Do I need a catchphrase now?
Well, when we bring you back on, you think of one. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. So, Angelo, what's your catchphrase?
All right. My catchphrase is complexity is the enemy of security. If it's too complex to explain, you're probably not secure. So
Okay.
it should be easy, and it should be and you should be able to say, yes, that door is closed. Yes, it's locked. And yes, I have one key. That's really kind of along the lines of
There you go.
reducing complexity. And Andrew?
Mine is the best security device resides between our ears if we so choose to use it. So with that, thank you again, Justin. And again, look at our website to get more information about this exciting technology from Rixon Technologies on tokenization. And until next time, podcasters, we'll talk to you next time. Have a good day. Stay safe.